Okay, I'm going to start with the introduction and say good morning, everyone. My name is Julinda Ladie, and I am the co-producer for Beautiful Black Books, presented by Poetry Center San Jose, with our host, Santa Clara Poet Laureate Tshaka Campbell, and featuring artist Cave Canem, fellow James Cagney from Oakland, California. I want to take this time to acknowledge that our city of San Jose exists on unceded land of the Muwakama Ohlone. We recognize the right the Ohlone people have to this land, which they have stewarded throughout the generations. We acknowledge that this land has come under control of various entities through violence and dishonesty. And we recognize the history and legacy of colonialism that impacted the indigenous peoples, their traditions, their territories, and practices. We acknowledge that every member of the San Jose community continues to benefit from the use and occupation of this land. We recognize that the Muwakama Ohlone people are alive and flourishing members of the community today. Let us take a moment of silence to pay respect to their elders and to all the Ohlone people of the past and the present. Thank you. Now here's some words about our support. Poetry Center San Jose is a member-supported organization, and it is funded in part by grants from Applied Materials Foundation, the City of San Jose Office of Cultural Affairs, Poets and Writers of Silicon Valley Community Foundation. SV Creates in partnership with the County of Santa Clara and the California Arts Council are also supported in part by SV Creates National Endowment for the Arts American Rescue Plan grant. We also thank the Brandenburg Family Foundation and Ann and Mark Art Party for their generous giving. Now we have some upcoming events. Our next event will be Writing Multicultural Poetry Workshop with Joseph Butch Schorskoff Jr. as part of Santa Clara County Youth Poet Laureate Program for youth 13 to 18 years of age. This program will be on Zoom March 23rd at 4 p.m. And yes, it's free. San Jose Poetry Slam is also Zoom, and its feature is Lisa Sheen on Sunday, March 26th at 7 p.m. And one more workshop we have is called Still We Rise for youth led by Sophia Aguilar, Friday, March 31st at 4 p.m. And that is also on Zoom, and that's free as well. The Santa Clara County Youth Poet Program is accepting applications for youth ages 13 to 18 until April 10th. Please share this announcement with all your young writers in your community. And we have a link on our website. Shazura is also accepting submissions of poetry, fiction, and nonfiction and visual art. And the Red Wheelbarrow Poetry Prize will be open for all submissions on April 1st. And this is no joke. The first prize is $1,000. Second prize is $500, and the third is $250. And all top 5 will be published in the Red Wheelbarrow Literary Magazine. And Ellen Bass will be the final judge. And more about this program, you can find it on our website at poetrycentersanjose.org. And now to introduce our host for the program. Santa Clara County Poet Laureate Tshaka Campbell has authored 4 books entitled Tarman, Muted Whispers, Tunnel Vision, and Stuff I Will Write More. His latest project, In Our Words, is an anthology of youth poetry and visual art from Santa Clara County. This is part of a larger program of Bringing the Light, composed of events and initiatives whom aim to empower youth of all ages. Tshaka began writing poetry long before performing it in an attempt to find his own voice and his point of view within the art form. As a performer, he is recognized and accomplished artist internationally, and perform accolades include not only being a member of the Narakian National Poetry Slam and the De Poetry Lounge slam team. He also earned grand champion title in San Francisco and Hollywood, California. In 2010, he also was honored with the UK Unsigned Artist Award in poetry. Tshaka has toured a number of US cities and across the globe, featuring venues such as the legendary Apollo Theater and the O2 in London, England. He currently resides in San Jose and continues to ask the world to listen different. Welcome to Tshaka.
Thank you. God, I hate my bio. I feel like when people read it, I feel real old. Anyway, I appreciate that. Look, so for folks who have been on the on one of our episodes before, Beautiful Black Books, you already know this, but for folks that are new and that will see this later, welcome to Beautiful Black Books. Again, as Jalinda mentioned, it is brought to you by myself and Poetry Center San Jose. And basically, it's a reoccurring program featuring Black writers in conversation, followed by Q&A. And I think, you know, what I really love about this show, and I think what makes it a little bit unique, is it's set to be a vessel of exchange. We want to bring Black writers to our communities and our communities to these writers to learn about their sources of inspirations that were part of their sort of that formed them into becoming the people and the poets and the poets and writers they are. So that's sort of what the genesis of the program is. But without further delay, what I'm going to do is read a bit of James's bio. And I got to say beforehand, this is like dropping a tiny pebble into the universe. This is a tiny bit of what this brother has done and accomplished. So we'll get into a little bit more later and dig a little deeper. But James Cagney's second poetry of collection, Martian, The Saint of Loneliness, is a winner of the 2021 James Laughlin, I may be pronouncing that incorrectly, Laughlin, for those that want to check it out, award for the Academy of American Poets. His first Black Steel Magnolias in the Hour of Chaos Theory won the PEN Oakland Josephine Miles Award in 2018. His work has appeared in Alta Magazine, the Best American Poetry 2022, and the Beat Not Beat anthology co-edited by Tshaka. For more information, we'll drop James's email address and website and all that information in the chat on jamescagneypoet.com. But you know, as I said, this is like, okay, accolades, right? I'll go back to many years ago when I first moved back into the Bay Area. And I think it might have been Berkeley. I think it was a Berkeley slam. And, you know, I'm just kind of getting back into I come directly from New York, so I understood that poetry scene. I didn't understand sort of as much the Bay Area. And, you know, they were like, James is coming to feature. And there was this like aura. I remember this aura in the room. And then you came in and then I understood. So like, I think, you know, for me, there's so much more to you that you bring to not only the community, but I think to the poetry world that is not detailed out in this bio. But anyway, we're just gonna jump in. It's so good to see you, brother. It's been a long time. We've shared a stage together many moons ago. I think it was literally on my birthday. Yeah, before the pandemic. We did it was a well-read writing series, I think, out here, and it was my birthday. So I was honored to share the stage with you there, but it's been far too long. So tell the folks where you're hailing from right now. Where are you talking to us from?
Oh, I'm live on location from Oakland, California, in my kitchen as we speak.
And in the roots of it all. You know, when I was putting thoughts together on what to talk to you about, what kept coming back to me is like Oakland, and I don't know exactly why, but you know, I want to start off with how, you know, you're from Oakland. How does that find its way into your work, or does it find its way into your work?
what immediately occurs to me is that Oakland is me, since I have, been and stayed here since birth. And I don't know how to categorize what writing from Oakland means to me, or what being a resident of Oakland means to me. It's sort of like interviewing a fish about water. I don't really know exactly what I'm supposed to say to you. What I can say is that I honor and love and appreciate the life that I've been given, the diversity of this city, the variety of voices and people, I guess, that I've learned from over the years, both just in my life naturally and as an artist. And I really honor and appreciate being a resident from here. They're to me, and maybe that's just indicative of home. There is to me a warmth and a comfort here that doesn't feel available anywhere else. So yeah, so I don't know how truly to answer that.
No, I mean it makes absolute sense, right? If it's something that's part of the, it's part of the air. So it's like, how do you describe the air that it's just here? You know what I mean? And it's everything.
I would that whatever the poems that I can do, I hope that they both sound and feel as diverse and as grounded as this city presents itself to me. Gotcha. I don't know. I don't know. Maybe that should be my statement on that, I guess.
All of the statements are good. All of the statements are good, but that makes a lot of sense to me. It resonates. It resonates with me as well. You talked about, sort of your life in Oakland, like sort of the diversity of it. Talk to us a little bit about, and because I've heard snippets of it, but talk to me a little bit, if you're comfortable enough, about your life and what sort of led you to sort of being in this space, being in, looking at poetry and becoming a poet and things of that sort.
I was always had a facility for writing and for English and for words. Even as a kid in school, neither myself. I mean, I was not particularly worried about any classes wherein I had to write in order to get through it. Math is a different conversation. But it's like, but it's like I've always had a facility for language, and I played around with you mentioned earlier about trying to find your voice, and I guess what my version of that was I was really interested in movies and watched a lot of television. So the first experiments that I was doing as a junior high school kid was trying to write scripts. I grew up on episodes of Alfred Hitchcock Presents and The Twilight Zone and stuff like that, and was fascinated by these short stories that had these weird little twists at the end. And I tried to create my own versions of that. So I would try to do, plays and stuff like that. And I, in the 10th grade, I did I gave myself the assignment of doing a 1,000-page soap opera, which was basically in script form that I hand wrote out. And part of my reason for doing that is because I was stuck in gym, which was my homeroom, and for that class, which was my second or third period, the school itself was still being earthquake retrofitted.
Oh, wow.
And so none of the students actually were being forced to change because you can't use the lockers. So you get an automatic A over A. You just have to be in this class for an hour and 10 minutes. You can shoot basketball, which I was unable to do, or, just hang out. And what homework can I do for my third period? So, I gave myself this assignment to just sort of just create some characters and write like a story. And that's kind of where my writing life started. Poetry was never really on the table for me until I got into my early 20s. And by that point, my mom was very, very ill. And I was, we had both sort of survived my father's illness from cancer or whatnot. And so I inherited her and taking care of her in a way. And as the story turned out, and I'm trying to compress this hour-long story I'm thinking about. um,
By the time.
what do you call it? Another friend of mine had discovered that I could write, and subsequently invited me to go to poetry readings that they had known about. I had not really understood or heard of what, poetry readings were at cafes or whatnot. And what that kind of started was me pretty much taking care of my mom during the day and doing several days a week at night, going out to these open mics and stuff like that throughout the Bay Area between Oakland, Berkeley, and San Francisco. I always describe discovering poetry as an on-the-job training, because as a high schooler, I knew who Langston Hughes was. I knew who Emily Dickinson was. They didn't matter to me in a way. How are they going to help me in a hallway fight at Tech or whatever? But it's like I had to sort of discover poetry in person, listening to these people share these stories and be personal. Because one of the biases or prejudices I had, I didn't even realize you could talk about yourself in poems. I thought poetry was about raccoons and rivers and trees and stuff like that. And I thought that's what poetry is. I didn't know you could use a poem to talk about getting arrested. I didn't know you could use a poem about talking about being depressed. I didn't know that poetry had such a wide facility. So going to those open mics sent me to the library to try to figure out what this was. And I kind of like educated myself, both from reading and trying to discover various people, and then just listening to people do their thing and represent themselves.
Right. There's so many things you hit there in terms of like how you got into the work. The love of I too wasn't so much the Twilight Zone I watched as well. It's science fiction, right? Just science fiction. The idea of the infinity, right? The idea of what's unknown. And I loved that sort of that aspect of it, which is what kind of again brought me toward poetry. So I see a lot of similarities there. And then listen, folks, he just said he's been knocking this out since 10. So there is, he's been at work since. So
just really quickly, since I barely get to talk to you, did you ever do or experiment in any other kind of writing outside of poetry?
Short stories, a little bit of short stories and things like that. But for me, there's something about that space, and we'll get to this in a minute. There's something about that space of that period of time where, like you just said, you are trying to. There's such an art in trying to condense that hour-long story that you said into this thing, and there's something about that I'm really drawn to. So I've experimented, dipped in and out, but not that's the next phase. That's the next phase. But so going back to that, a couple of things, right? You talked about so the words and the facility of words and that driving sort of what you how you part of what you put into your work. And I've taught a lot of workshops where, at the first day, we go through all the poetry, the allegory, and what's the meaning of a metaphor, and villanelles and haikus, et cetera, et cetera. And then the next day, I come in and say, forget everything that I just taught you, and now let's write. Do you feel as a poet and from your experience that, the formal training, sort of, so to speak, of poetry do you need that to be successful? What place does that, what role does that play sort of in being a poet in your eyes?
Because I got into poetry through the back door in a public venue, I feel a little bit cheated that I did not start in thinking of poems as far as form, because my free verse stuff, as I was beginning to try to experiment with it, I would describe to you as very prosy. It's like very, very overwritten and very overtly detailed, and it's like massively long in a lot of ways. And I kind of wish that I started and understood and learned form because as I'd been practicing for a bunch of years, and then started meeting more professional poets and published poets and teachers, I was like, they, from what I see, are experimenting and playing with these formats that, to me, feel like math. To say, I'm going to jump back a couple of minutes and say, for all my facility with words, I absolutely struggled with math and stayed on the fourth grade level for the bulk of my school learning because numbers were a struggle for me. And by the way, hi, Norm. So it feels to me that form is almost like math in my head, in that I am measuring lines for a particular kind of rhythm and beat. And then I am looking for a way, like a puzzle, to put together particular rhymes. Mm-hmm. I felt unconfident writing rhymes, if you will, despite, watching hip hop grow. It turns out, parenthetically, I would have much rather been a DJ than an MC. But sort of like it's like I didn't feel that comfortable in writing rhyming work because it felt like I didn't really know how to do it. It felt silly and juvenile to me. And I didn't fully understand how to do sonnets, and I wished that I did and still do and stuff like that. So all of that word salad is to say, only now that I've been practicing after all these years, am I trying to find a relationship with poetic forms and try to blow them up and figure out my way and my comfort through them. Because I feel as a poet, I absolutely should know and practice and have a comfort and facility with a lot of those forms and stuff like that. And I just feel like I'm almost catching up to what many of my colleagues and cohorts have been doing in university and college that I didn't quite get to look at and study. So only now am I trying to find a way and a comfort with form that I kind of didn't even realize existed way back when I first started.
Got it. Now, do you think if you knew that back then, do you think and this is kind of a question. The first part of it is, do you think your work would have impacted your audience differently?
It's possible. It's possible because, for example, in the slams that I had attended, as a listener, sometimes I intellectually understand that there is this pattern that these individuals are doing, and they are finding their own particular voice and way through this pattern. And that pattern to me sounds like a form that they have placed on themselves like a garment and have figured out a way to play with and open up and reinvent for this event, for themselves, and for whatever that subject is that they wanted to talk about. And I feel like I absolutely could have been a completely different man, a completely different writer or whatnot, if I had relied on form as a tool. Even for example, every time I listen to a reading, say, of Sonia Sanchez, I'm always like, damn, I should practice more haiku. It's only 3 lines, Cagney. Get your ass together. You can write this on a bus stop. And yet and still, I'm kind of, I don't know, I think too deeply or whatever, or just don't allow myself the patience. Right. But yeah, it's a struggle for me to try to catch up with form. Yeah.
It's like breaking out of the norm, right? It's sort of, there's so much to talk about. And so now I'm worried about, I've got to figure out how to talk about this in the form I know. More or less now you're going to stack this other stuff on, and I don't know that I've gotten the story out,
Yeah, exactly. It's sort of like, as a poet, I walk into a room, in jeans and a t-shirt, and all the other poets are wearing ties. To me, the tie is the form. And it's like, I've earned a place to be in here, yet I feel underdressed because I'm not doing what you guys are doing.
Yeah.
That's just, and by the way, that is just me critiquing myself. No one is form hating on me. No one's hollering at me or critiquing me or anything else. There is no audience or no villains, critiquing what I'm doing. Only me, only I am investigating myself with form, pattern, rhythm, and rhyme and stuff like that.
Yeah, we are our harshest critics, as they say, right? I often talk about after leaving the stage, always feeling like, should I have done that poem? Or could I have looked at it a different way, et cetera, which has nothing to do with anyone else other than my own, whether we call it insecurities or whatever the case may be. But it's funny how we battle with these things, both, in the world and in our work as well, right? It's all connected. So, we talked a little bit about the audiences and such, and you mentioned about being in slam and then coming in other spaces where folks are coming with ties and such, and I don't know how some people talk about it, like page poetry versus performance art, and that's a whole beautiful Black book session within itself. But more specifically, when you sit down and write, do you typically, especially with your books, do you have a particular audience in mind that you're writing for when you sit down to start a book?
God, no, because that's kind of like creating the perfect meal for 10 very varied people. You're never going to create something that's going to satisfy them as a slammer in a way. You're never going to create a poem that is going to galvanize this entire room before. Right. Yeah, it's like you don't know if that's actually truly going to work. So it's shoot, I don't know. I don't know. I think I just kind of like lost. I just kind of like lost what my point was.
Well, let me as you're kind of gathering that, let me put it in another word, because that makes absolute sense, right? You can't, depending on what I would assume, depending on what the
yeah, that's what it is. It's that no matter what it is that I'm doing, I can't write this for the audience. I guess what I'm trying to do is write this with a certain clarity, so that irrespective of what your past is or what your education is or anything else, your concerns or politics, you have a clear vision and of what it is that I am presenting. I'm not writing to any person. I am trying to write it open enough so that wherever you are coming from, you understand what is being shown to you in these poems and these lines, and you understand what it is that I'm saying. I'm barely interested if you like it. What I am really curious about, or what I'm really trying to do, is make it clear enough just so that you understand and don't get lost in what the poem is or what the poem is doing or whatever like that. I want to open it and write to clarity so you can dismiss the poem in entirety just because you're not feeling it. But at the very least, I want you to always be able to say, I know what you were doing or saying, or I know what I was hearing. Even if the poem is a word salad, which I love and enjoy writing and stuff like that, yet even with that, I still feel like a sort of that kind of metaphorical word stew still has a particular flow and plot line that an individual can still follow and see what it is that is being written or what it is that's being said to them. So yeah, I don't at all think about getting the audience's approval. I want the audience to know what it is that is being said, and I want them to see what it is, the imagery or whatever it is that I'm trying to present.
Gotcha. Norm says in the chat, he said that I said like honoring your voice for any audience.
Yeah, thank you. Absolutely, because it's also taken me a very, very long time to understand what it is that we as poets are doing. What is the end game that you're doing? And it occurred to me that because everyone does and approaches things differently, what you are doing is you are creating the perfect song for your unique voice. And it's sort of like you can't writes a song that's going to reach me, what you're going to do is say something, sing something that is going to touch me because I hear what you're saying and connect to it.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's sort of like you are part of what being a poet is, or being a writer is just figuring out exactly what your voice is and what your strength is as a storyteller, and leaning into that and engaging that and see if you can grow it and manifest it even deeper or more. But it finally occurred to me that that's what we're chasing. We're chasing the ideal way of how we transmit story and information just in our own voice and experience. You know, that's what the end game ultimately is, I think.
Yeah, no, I think that's perfect. I mean, I've done, you know, again, speaking with youth poets or folks that are just starting to write, and there's such this barrier of, before they even sit down, they're worried about the expectation of how this is going to be perceived, right? And so, you know, and I always talk about, like, well, then you're starting to write the poem before you even write the poem. You know, so, let's try to, you know, get back to the purity, at least what I call it's like the purity of the intent, right? But no, that makes a lot of sense. Now, you had mentioned, so I'm gonna take what you just said, right, and just kind of flip it a little bit, in the sense that, and I always have a story, you know, you talk to poets, there's always a prelude to every piece of stuff. But I did something online the other day, and it was this lady talking about, like, writers and artists, and the idea that the world is, you know, sort of commercializing art, right? Commercializing writers. And I think it was mainly coming from what was happening in Florida, and you know, removing books from education and such. But what it got me thinking about is the role of the poet. Right, it was a little different than what you were talking about. You're more internally understanding, like, the role, my role internally as a poet. But to the masses, to the larger audience, what do you think our role is in society?
The background that I have, especially as a teenager, especially as a high schooler, was journalism, which I really appreciated having that as a framework, because it taught me some basic writing skills about how one passes information to readers that I found very, very valuable. And in the years of doing poetry then, partially of what I realized, that the act of what I'm doing when I get up and go to an open mic or a poetry event is, you know, I guess I'm then partially quoting William Carlos Williams here, is I am looking to be told some level of truth that the news is neglecting to say out loud. You know, this morning I was listening to, you know, some news report about how newscasters, especially on Fox News, finally actually acknowledged how much they knew they were lying during, you know, Homeboy's reign in Washington. And it's sort of like, so yeah, you are absolutely turning and confessing to us that you are willingly passing off bullshit and placing it under the banner of news. And it turns out that I think I learn more and get more from poets, because what our responsibility, it seems to me, is to participate in the world. You know, is to go out, live your life, go work, go love, go walk and march the streets, and then in a poem report back to me what you have seen and experienced and felt. And that to me is reportage, and that to me is the news. You know, that to me is kind of like what I am waiting for when I even dare click on the news on television. I'm waiting for someone to tell me what the fuck is going on and to be honest about it. And you know, and it's sort of like, and it turns out to me, one of the most reliable places for me to get that information directly and to learn that truth is from other poets. You know, it's sort of like, because when I was starting, one of the things that became very valuable to me, and the thing that I would tell other people who would dare ask me, is, you know, in your poetry, just tell the truth. You know, that is the only thing I am interested in. That's what I'm listening for. That's what I show up for. And if you ask me what you should do as a new poet with a brand new pen and notebook, all my advice to you is read and tell the truth. You know, it's like that. That's, I mean, there's nothing else to do. Yeah, because they're not completely doing that in the news that you rely on. So, you know, ultimately it becomes up to you and the community.
Yeah, makes absolute sense. It's like they talk about the fact that, you know, you always go when you want to look at history, when you want to go back and look at history, you go look at the poets, because there's no agenda, right? They're not vested to any agenda outside of the experience that they're putting on page. So that I love that. I love that answer. Yeah, we're the truth tellers, right?
Yeah.
And hopefully all of us are the truth.
Fingers crossed, Tshaka. Fingers crossed.
Yeah. Well, so going into that, you know, a little bit more. So I know we're gonna get some time for you, so our wonderful readers can hear you speak. So I have a couple of questions leading into that, but God, I could talk to you. I could sit here and talk to you forever. So as a poet, as a writer, as a person who is, you know, a documentarian, as previously known as Most Def would say, Yasmin Bey, when you look at that world that you're in, are there any negative aspects to it, to being a poet?
Ego, and then I need to sit and think for a second. If there's anything beyond narcissism that I would consider negative into being a poet, and I guess not. I guess not. I guess the worst of it is just sort of the idea and the energy of narcissism, of just being maybe hypnotized by the attention and the energy of a room accepting and approving of you. It's a very hypnotic thing. To stop and step a halfway back, I have to acknowledge that, you know, what we do isn't easy for everybody. That public speaking is a huge fear for a great population, you know, and it's not easy for anybody to stand naked in front of a crowded room that are listening to you. And I, you know, it's a couple of times that I've been on stage and just sort of like woke up to the idea that the entire room has actually stopped and is listening to me. That is a frightening prospect. And there is a part of the personality and part of the ego then that if it gets turned on to that attention and energy, that to me is almost sort of weaponized, because it's sort of like you are not here then to, as we said a few minutes ago, to tell the truth. You're not really here to report. You are here because of the delicious energy of attention and approval. Right. And that to me becomes a negative thing, that if you are thirsty for a room to look at you and praise you and clap you and pat you on the back, yeah, then to me, uniquely myself only, you are a dangerous individual, because I'm not sure how much of what you're doing and saying I can actually trust. Yeah. You know, there's a sort of daring that artists and poets take and should take and need to take in order to challenge themselves and their audiences. And if you are narcissistic, you are not going to dare anything. You are going to keep beating the same drum that got you applause a few years ago. And that is what makes you, to me, a dangerous individual, because you're not growing. You are there to soak up the attention and be loved by this room or these people. You're not really here to push yourself as an artist, you're not really here to tell us the truth about yourself, your story, or anything else. You are here for the eyes and for the noise, for people to slap you on the back when you get off stage. That to me is the only negative thing I can think of.
Yeah, you know, it's funny. The first word you said was ego, because that was the first thing that was coming in my mind as well, but in a slightly different sense. And you know, as you kept talking, maybe I replaced the word with like daring. And this is really about like the idea that there has to be something, I think, right, within the poet to allow you, to enable you to get on stage in the first place, to feel like, okay, what I'm saying is not even worthy, but like like there has to be a certain amount of ego, I feel, to be like, okay, what I'm gotta say is important enough for you guys to stop and listen.
Word.
You know, and so I think there is that ego, but as you said, when it then gets fed by the post, you know, the post revealing of my truth, then it turns into something else. That's a great way, I think, a great way to talk about it. I mean, you know, I know in anything we do there, maybe negative is not the right word, but there's always going to be this sort of, you know, other side to everything. And that's, you know, I like to put that out there just so, again, folks that are coming into this art form need to sort of, you know, look for these pitfalls, right?
Yeah.
To do that.
Yeah. Just to you, just between us, since nobody's listening.
Oh, cool.
I just wanted to share with you, just because it touched this a little bit, not the negativity, but the more positive aspects of ego and releasing and being yourself. Is one night in Berkeley, I saw this poet get up on stage, this dude who I actually knew, and he did what he called, or what he named as, the wiggle poem or wiggle poetry. And what he did then is he actually laid down on the stage on his back and vibrated as if he was having a stroke.
Yeah.
And the poem then had verses, because the speed and the intensity of which he's doing these shapes on the floor varied, you know, from one thing to the next. And so here's the thing, and here's the reason why I said that. First, you know, okay, there's an argument. First, that to me is a performance of someone who has no ego, who absolutely does not care and is not there for the approval of the audience or anything else. They are an artist who has created something, and they felt comfortable. They felt themselves have enough confidence within themselves to get up in front of a crowded room of half-drunk people and do that. And the second thing behind that too is, hang on a second. The other element to that really impressed me is that I don't remember another individual that read that night, even myself. I don't remember anything else after all of these years of whatever else happened that night. I remember the venue, which was the Starry Plow, and I remember him. I don't remember nothing else from that night. You know, and I possibly could get dementia and will still remember that particular dude doing that poem. And so to say that wordless piece held such an incredible impact for me is gigantic, because it showed me a level of confidence that you can maintain and develop without feeling a need for ego or a need for approval. You know, because it's like, that was so different and so unique and so crazy, quite frankly. It's sort of like, you've just gotten on stage and released something and illustrated to me a level of courage that I don't think I've seen anybody else do before or since. Wow. And that was the most massively impressive piece, performance, or poem I think I've encountered, or that's going to be number one if somebody makes me make a list.
I love it. I love it. Breaking that form. Going back to the form you're talking about, right? Just breaking it, and it delivered it delivered whatever it was supposed to deliver.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. So look, I got two more questions for you before we get into you sharing your wonderful work with us. So there was a movie a while ago called The Gods Must Be Crazy, right? And this the whole kind of genesis behind it is a Coke bottle drops and takes it to his village and realizes it created a problem because prior to that Coke, they had no word for ownership, right? And how that word, completely changed the makeup of his entire community. So much so that then he takes it and wants to get rid of the Coke bottle and throw it away because it's dismantle everything. is there a word, do you think, in the English in language that we could live without? Or phrase?
That's kind of like a beautiful setup for a joke that I cannot speed right now. Damn. You know, I don't know. I don't have an immediate answer for that because I guess parenthetically what I'd say to you is I sometimes was thinking about how certain conservative people may, you know, I guess I'm saying is I'm waiting for someone to sneak up to me and ask me about using vulgarity in poetry, in my poems, in using all of those words in the context of poetry. I'm waiting. Nobody's really truly done it yet, but I guess I'm waiting for that.
Got it.
And the reason I'm failing at sort of pulling a word that I think should be erased from the language is because in an awful way, and maybe in a positive way too, all of these words that we use are about and point to something. Mm-hmm. And I guess I am bothered with the habit of younger people to want to lock away certain words, ideals, or phrases or whatever like that keep us from ever using or referencing those again, and to daringly attack people who do use them thoughtlessly or so like that.
Yeah. Because,
you know, and it's weird because, you know, even words that technically are vulgar, you know, it's like all of these words do have like a purpose and a language, and they do point to something. And it's like, and yeah, words do have meaning and do have power. And yes, it's a thing to think more positively than to fall in the trap of thinking negatively. And yes, and yes. At the same time, I feel like I don't think anything should be completely off the table as opposed to forgotten. Maybe if I can say it like that. Because, you know, there is an assumption that we and the generation that we are in and represent is sort of perfect because we can go back and sort of edit the mistakes of the generation before us and try to pretend that those choices didn't exist or those choices didn't matter. But to me, you know, all of that is valuable and all of that is part of history. You know, all of that is about is that concept and that cliche about, you know, in order to know where you're going, you should know where you come from. And I feel like there is an education to be had of looking at things that people want to try to bury, you know, or get over or forget. You know, and I don't know, you know, and it's like, maybe I should also parenthetically say, I'm not a parent. And apparently people, when they do have children, suddenly think more protectively about those kids as far as language and as far as words and as far as trying to put their son or daughter in a sealed bubble and keep them as safe and as away from the nasty things as long as possible. I empathize with that, but I'm also feeling like the nasty uncle who's like, they need to know, you know, they you know, so, you know, there was one reading I did at this bookstore where they had a stage inside the store, and that stage just so happened to be in the children's section of this bookstore. And I get up on stage and I do my thing, and there's actually a poem that, to be totally honest with you, is it turns, the energy of it turns on the use of the F word. Mm-hmm. And when I get on stage and do this, you know, you know, it's about commanding space and I know how to fill a room or whatever's like that. So I'm doing this poem and I'm having all of these people sitting there on this stage watching me, but I'm not really paying attention to the idea that other people in the store around us can hear what it is we're doing because my ass is so loud. And so I'm doing this poem and and I get to the to the F word that shifts the poem into a different place. And as I'm standing there looking at all of these people who are watching me and with me, straight through the aisle, I see on the staircase, this guy who works at the bookstore is walking up the stairs and he's doing this. And there's a part of me that's like, that what you probably would have read that as is maybe you could do this a little quieter, or maybe you can be aware of what your language is. But his act in doing that made me want to go louder. There is an active FU that suddenly appeared within me. That's like, no, you asked me to be here to represent myself. Here I am. And my feeling, even thinking about that, and sarcastically and wrongly and throw me in jail if you want, is that, the kids need to know. It's like, if you're going to say, there are certain words or whatever like that we should not be using in certain contexts, maybe part of it is, why are we protecting people, or why are we removing certain language from certain instances, and why are we not teaching about what this language and what these phrases are and what they're really saying and showing us and telling us about ourselves? Yes, you can learn what we have been doing in language and change it because of its origin and stuff like that. I happily can contradict myself there. But at the same time, I'm like, I don't want you to put words completely in a jail. I want them to just sort of go out of fashion. Maybe that's the thing. It's sort of like you say, are there words that we should, completely never use again, or whatever? I'm thinking, well, child molestation, rape or whatever. But then, it's not then about that word, it's about the action.
Yeah.
So I'm not offended by language. I'm not offended by words or even the dreaded N-word. I'm offended and concerned about the action surrounding the words it is that you're using. You can be completely silent and still be an asshole, as far as I'm concerned. But it's about the action itself that goes around certain language that I would like locked away, as opposed to the language itself, maybe.
Yeah, that is such a fantastic answer. It's something that I've been asking myself and others for ages, right? What's that word? And I would keep coming back to, we own words, right? We're poets. That's what we do. And a word, in whatever case, it takes up space. So the word exists, and then it has space that it takes up. So now what you're telling me now is that there's a bit of this space of the world or the universe I can't talk about. And that limits me as an artist in the work that I do, right? So I've gone back. My first instinct was like, hate, take the word hate out. And I'm like, how much, funny enough, beauty can come out of that. You know what I mean? So it's like, I don't know.
Yeah, I wrote something a long time ago called "Hate: A Love Story." So
right.
Absolutely.
Right. But I'm just interested in how folks kind of think about that and what's behind it. One last question. This is going to be a little bit of a weird question, and then we'll go into your reading. But if you were given an ultimatum, right, where your work could either only be heard, now you have the choice of choosing the narrator, right, or it can only be read from papers, which would you choose?
That's a really beautiful question. And I guess my choice would actually, despite the word that I just used, a voice, that misspeaking, I think my choice would be to only be read. If you forced me to do that, that would be my choice, even though I'm kind of disappointed in it. The reason I made that choice is only because, to me, books last longer. Me, that in a strange sort of time thing, the version of me that was in the Oakland and Berkeley public libraries trying to figure out what poetry is, that I, as a published poet now, cannot go back and speak to myself going through the aisles of this library because my work only exists as an oral event.
Right.
So you can't sit with and read whatever it is that I'm truly saying, or you can't analyze it from a lyrical standpoint on the page. You only can engage it as an oral event. And I'm like, there is so much more that you can get out of the actual language on the page. And I guess if you corner me and want me to make a choice, I guess I would rather be like a page poet then.
Mm-hmm.
And to say for us and our conversation, I absolutely have had long discussions about page versus stage poetry, and was introduced in my first couple of years, to be honest with you, the idea that there were poets that I was listening to, because I had like a friend that would always go with me and sort of point out things and share with me things because she had known so much more about poetry than I did. She was my introduction to a lot of this. Is that she pointed out to me, you know, somebody would get off stage and I would really love what they had just done. And she would be like, you know what, you can't really read that. You know, the thing that you just heard would not completely, totally work on the page.
Right.
And those conversations made me try to figure out how to get as close in the middle as possible to make sure that this piece sounds, that the music of it sounds cool. Yet if you pick up my book and read it by yourself in the silence of your own room, you still get a certain impact of what it is that I'm trying to do. That I want to split the difference between the me looking through a physical book, trying to see what I can do or what the options are in poetry, and the me sitting in an audience listening to, you know, HD Mo do this abstract word poetry that makes no sense to me, but has a music in it and a confidence in his voice that is just really, really stunning. Yeah. So I wanted to make sure to split the difference. I guess what I mostly am always thinking about is the people who are going to encounter this work and never ever meet me or hear me. You know, I guess to go back and answer or to answer a phantom question, I want to try to write for the person I will never ever meet and have that person be impressed with what just happened. Yeah. And I would much rather them encounter the words as opposed to the sound. The sound is great. The sound is gorgeous music. And maybe I'll end with saying briefly that I was very, very blessed and fortunate to go to a reading at UC Berkeley of Gwendolyn Brooks. Mm-hmm. And I had, you know, of all of the poems or whatever that I'd encountered in school or whatever is like that, and cared about or didn't, I always ran across her poem, We Real Cool, and was like, well, that's a really cool piece of poetry. That's a really lovely, lovely work. I've read that poem before. I've you know, encountered it before. I've, you know, whatever, recited or whatever. And then all of a sudden, I hear her do it. You know, I hear her present it in her language. And that short ass poem becomes a totally different thing just because she's pronouncing it. And she did not at all read it in any way that I would have expected. She never ever read it in the way that I was reading it to myself and impressing myself with it. She read it and it became a brand new piece of poetry to me. And that is beautiful and that is exciting. So I would rather the person appreciate what's going on the page and whoa, if they find me on YouTube or an audio version of what I'm doing, and then it adds to that experience, well, then that's a great blessing. Glory, hallelujah.
Right. Lovely. I love that answer. We're in sync there. And again, I think that's just unpacking that as a whole nother, you know, a whole nother web series within it itself.
Call me back. we can do this every weekend if you like to.
We got slots, so we can make it. So, you know, I do want to give folks again time to, like I said, we could talk all day, but I want our audience here today and later on to hear your beautiful work. So I am going to pass it on to you to share a bit of yourself with us.
Respect and thank you. And again, it's a great honor to be able to have done this and had this beautiful conversation with you, Tshaka.
Absolutely. We got some to still talk about after this. So we ain't.
Respect. Actually, in prepping for this, there was one poem that I know that I wanted to start off with, and I'm glad that we sort of talked about the news in poetry or whatever. Because to be honest, I wanted to share this with you, despite the fact that it is not in the book.
Mm-hmm.
But I also wanted to share it because I'm gonna read the poem that is in the book, because it turns out I've been moved to write about, how did I say this last time? I thought I was finished writing this poem, but the poem was not finished with me. Okay? So maybe I should let that be that and give you the title. The title of this poem comes from something a quote that I heard on the news while I was in bed with my back turned to the television set. After the shooting that happened in New York, when they were doing coverage of this, I heard this individual say this line, and this line forced me to write this poem. So the title of the poem and that quote was, "Teach your children to be small and invisible." We're planting bullets because seeds are illegal in poor hands. Our forfeited farms are either parking lots or cemeteries. Our scarecrows canceled choirs with selfie sticks. Farms of the US were once grandparents with mules, but now they're corporations that harvest guns from the ground. We used to bury elders, their fists dripping mustard seeds. Now, seeds are more illegal than bullets, and my family can't afford to bury anything. Hatches, vices, debt. Oh, ghost of Medgar Evers, pray for us. We twerk over what we can't repent, fight what we can't fuck. Look at us, all fancy with our fetishized compassion. The Constitution has been updated with plagiarized gunman manifestos and a centerfold of an AR-15. Free speech is only valuable when your point is rhetorical nonsense, but you don't hear me though. Your ears still ringing from the shootout at the softball game. Is it time for a new war yet? Wake up the president. We need fresh genocide to take pressure off our old one. We need cash back on fired bullets that didn't hit anything. We need cheerleaders on the battlefield commuting through dead cities. Here's the local supermarket holding active shooter drills and sweepstake giveaways. Here's a church closed for private baptism of bullets. Here's an icon of Mary holding an icon of a bulletproof baby Jesus beneath a speech balloon reading, "Hands up, don't shoot." Grief, it's what's for dinner at our Last Supper. Doubting Thomas ran a finger through Jesus's wound and a bullet popped out. We need a savior who can turn water into ammo and doesn't look like an out-of-work magazine model. There's a whole ass church in that open casket. Go get in it and know God. And hurry up so we can fill your grave with buckshot. Did you know another name for bullet is love letter? Is it better to give or receive? All our tears have been outsourced to unarmed countries. When the smoke clears, whoever's left standing gets to play eyewitness on morning TV. If you're going to be famous for 15 minutes, be breaking news. Be a top story where veteran reporters choke on their tears. Be described as very polite and very quiet and very shy. Smile for the grocery store security cameras while reloading. Pause your live stream for ad breaks from ammunition sponsors. A bullet by any other name will still bloom just as red as the love I feel during any American shootout. Which YouTube star will sing the anthem while a procession of police cars pull into the parking lot? In this country, we don't have a problem with guns. Our problem is with mental health, as in You must be crazy to think I would give up my gun. Or shoot first, take meds later. Or why doesn't a loaded gun count as healthcare? Did you know police do not offer buyback programs in affluent communities? They hold stand your ground workshops at high schools with kiddie shooting ranges. Did you know toy producer Tshaka once made real rifles? A buck's a buck, but don't tell that to a deer. Guns were once called peacemakers. Where's peace? So that's me revisiting and writing a sequel to a poem that is in the book, Martian, Saint of Loneliness, called Bullet Gumbo. If bullets exploded into flowers, maybe my son's effigy of ashes and clay would be worth it. So says every new parent handed a birth and death certificate stapled together. In some communities, this is health insurance. Look, I'm going to puff up like a bird and chirp. For those easily triggered, stick them up, motherfuckers. As you exit, double check that the body you're stepping over in the street isn't someone you know. You know what's tired? Memorial chalk outlines every Black History Month stenciled outside gentrified coffee shops for English bulldogs only. America scrubs its streets clean of history. America scrubs its streets clean with coppery bodies. Loofahs, afros, same difference. Asphalt angels, limbs like arms on a crazy clock that has no idea what time it is, right now or 200 years ago. I can no longer tell the difference between a casket and a crib, grandmama says. She done started knitting chalk outlines. She sees them more than flowers. She'd say the lilies springing from the holes in his chest smell like old churches full of out-of-print Bibles. If evolution is real, we're one generation away from a girl birthing a baby with bullet holes already in it. Not birthmarks, more like ricochets. It'll be an ignored miracle. You may have to watch the news all night. Asphalt angels, limbs extended into star points beneath a tableau of cops arranged like doubters in every Renaissance painting of a doomed Christ. Every rookie knows that death is certain and heaven is not. That's what makes a bullet an easier citation to write. Asphalt angels, bullets full of holy water, passed out like placebos at the trap house to inoculate against crime or blackness, whichever is first. It may look like grandmama is praying, but she's drafting obituaries like team stats. A journalist once paid her in a shotgun shell full of okra seeds and asked, "How can you find so much sorrow in such a small space?" She started counting a mental rosary of graves and said, "Here's what's so terrifying about tenderness, being the last one left to feel anything." Is it true guns don't kill people? Grandmama asked her doctor. Confusion kills people. Fear kills people. Hatred kills people. The first people armed are usually confused, afraid, and full of hate. Her doctor said, only if the gun is loaded with cancer. Grandmama knelt down to pray, then raised her hands where God could see them. Artillery father, who opened carry off the shooting range, hallowed point be thy name. Her doctor said, take 2 bullets every 10 minutes until it stops. If your God's not armed, you are going to the wrong church. When the preacher shouts, if you've been baptized, he means, show me your bullet wounds, the little puckered keloids where Christ has kissed you. Every mass shooting, and by mass, I mean form of worship, is an infomercial for the NRA, followed by pop-up gun shows, bringing all the boys to the yard faster than Girl Scout cookies. The streets were filled the other day with young people marching in protest, desperate to end gun violence. If their teachers had been armed, there would be no protesting. There, in fact, would be little difference between going to school or being held hostage. If a school loses a child to an armed teacher, the family will be awarded 10 minutes on Good Morning America, a certified death diploma, an engraved memorial desk with the child's name and likeness airbrushed in graffiti. Note, this offer is not available in all school districts. Is it true guns don't kill people? It depends on whether you consider a gun-based suicide waste of a good bullet or the ultimate act of patriotism. If you had to show a gun as a form of ID, then the phrase would be unarmed immigrants. These are challenging times with difficult questions to ponder. Why don't you come out to the balcony for some unoppressed air? Step up to the podium. Step out of the car with your hands up. That's not rain, that's blood plasma. The answer to all these riddles is dry firing from the sky. You know, and to think what my world or anybody's world, our world would be if they would actually do that on the evening news. Huh. Let me downshift and do something sweet and quiet. This poem is called Proof. My body has a legend, he says, mid-story, and wipes his mouth. Then, as to recite grace, stands at the table to prove it. Beneath the drape of his shirt, a savanna of skin ripples slightly. For a blink, I don't understand what's missing. He had no belly button, his stomach paved mythologically clean. We've been so casual, playing catch with origin stories, after class, over crepes and pancakes, our roll call of scars. We've been speaking of doctors and mistakes when his face shifted gears. He landed his fork like tapping a baton. This is how boys are, show and prove, tale of the tape. People are terrified by skin not meeting their expectations. For years, white women were forbidden from showing their navels on TV. The networks were alarmed over what they symbolized, how they seemed to prove something, root us together, seeing the placenta as nebula, a star field of skin, a chandelier from which we're all suspended, flaring out from the same light. If men can write shame laws over belly buttons, it's no surprise the fumbling of a Black child seeming new and helpless in a cage of fingers, a rabbit midwifed by a hawk. I know this now, yet how I doubted him, Lord. My sticky maple fingers trembled in prayer all night. Let me make sure that I represent this as well. This is interesting because I have periodically struggled to try to introduce certain poems to an audience. And even as I feel like, you know, if you have to actually say words before you read a poem to a room, then that poem's not quite finished. But sometimes I have to introduce a poem because it makes me nervous to read it. And I did an introduction and someone in the audience grabbed me and said, you know what, that introduction would make like a good poem itself. And so here you go. I'm gonna read that poetic introduction and then the poem itself, which is the title track to the book. So this is called Entering the Atmosphere of Martian. Do you know the word for this feeling, where you feel like a floating satellite or an astronaut on a spaceship with a dead motor. You're lonely, a little horny, hallucinating on boredom. You're millions of miles away from the scattered billiards of other planets, all more cold and sterile than you've ever felt. You're millions of miles away from Earth, too, small enough now for your pocket, floating miraculously. And in one blinking moment, as you watch the Earth spin, you say to yourself, I bet not one person is thinking of or missing me right now. Maybe they did a few minutes ago. Perhaps they will again soon. But in this moment, as you stare helplessly far away, you feel yourself the sole resident of a sleepy black hole. So what is the word for that? If your tongue knows the texture and flavor of this feeling, then the poem that follows is for you. This poem's called Martian. After terraforming your night skin into a constellation of succulence, what else is worth exploring? Tongue sensors scan new geophysic language, ultraviolet fingers in orbit spinning, rockets propelling sticky dream nipples through a necklace of star clusters. Your black gibbous moons, indecisive waxing, waning to and fro, sleep chanting canticles of milk behind a firewall of denim. Chocolate meteorites of magnetite and silica, their solar nutmeg fusion, their viscous humidity, their orbital launch and vapor trail, spreading nets of munitions across radiant fields of sweet air and bedspreads like any man at war. Your pulsar fountains sparkling applause in comets, every asteroid impact crater blasting open, a seed head of color. I succumb to zero gravity, my pressure modules splintering, hurtling from heaven. I am touch illiterate. I search for words in my own mouth, my sweet and sour lunar crater, despite its post-apocalyptic emptiness. What word best describes an appetite for exploration of the unknown? Don't say desire. Longing is a pornographic surname in certain galaxies. So how to read a map of black holes? How to guess the temperature of your nearest astronaut? Have you touched an alien life form today? You got me about to come is how I begin all my missions. You got me curious about what's out there and what flavor it assumes. I could live on your tang extract for 8 days and name each molecule uniquely after jazz singers, insect species, Jupiter's moons. My mouth could revive you, tongue your keyboard of nerves, a soft valley of new life forms to restring your upright spinal base. Psychedelic flowers to cultivate, weeping yeast for bread to bake. Your eyelashes and lips bruise me from inside out. Find me sticky and fibrous, a moldy peach shattered by the kitchen floor. I am stone, I am mop, I am swarm of sugared water, a bee shopping the spires of the giant blue hyssop, lactating sucrose. Did you know the origin for the word testimony? Back then, words were valued just that much. What makes it really strange is how easy its legend is to believe. A row of soldiers willing to exchange their balls if their words fall impotent. Please note, history's second choice in oathing after balls is Bible. Perhaps Adam's balls were filled with the word of God, or honey, or space dust. I only know Adam's first prayer was, "It's not you, it's me." Was God surprised by Adam as appetizer, his saintly rivulets of butter, his crunchy mass of breath, dust, and carnal itch. He named each animal, but there's never been a proper name for free-range loneliness migrating head to toe. And what did Adam eat? After naming each animal, did he lick it, check its seasoning? Who will feed us if we can't name what we want on a plate? Fuck you, my first robo-waiter yelled. I'll need tabs of Viagra and an extension cord, I stage whispered. Me, a quasar, light years from rapture, sitting in a spaceship as if awaiting to be accepted by an alien official. I had no Voyager discs to DJ or heartbeats to sample, just this astronomer's pubic canopy, its rainforest of fresh and fruity antibiotics. Use me to keep warm like how you once used a campfire. You'll need dry, fine tinder and friction spinning and grinding to work the flame up the ladder until embers awaken their bright red eyes and weep smoke. There's been weeping, but no one has touched me and triggered fire. No touch at all except to shove my shoulder as they shower past the line. If I remain in people's way, I shall be touched again. Even if touch rhymes with choke or punch or shove, it's still touch. I see sex as a conversation with various sticking points. My past lovers have been mutes with mouths full of mirrors or judges who gavel over guilt and sentences. How might you describe your first love? Clumsy or clever? Stupid or selfish? Or sad, sad, sad? The sun was first described as an erupting volcano falling from the sky, magmatic, hot to see, inflamed, brilliant, cast gold luminous and swelling upon its approach, darkness parting in star-crested waves. The sun itself described the flavor of darkness, how one might explain skin first tasted. Skin not your own, foreign and savory, its seasoned cells sweating oyster water. Swallowed flames reheat the body's forgotten science and wasted fertility. Now close the cargo doors of the shuttle. My engine begins firing and deorbit burn. Such complex algebra just to land in welcoming arms. I emerge from your shadow, dumb as an eclipse, but at least relieved. The world has remained the same. It is me made glossy with newness and unanswerable questions. My life, untouched, unloved, undercover? No, alive and throbbing and alone. How about a couple more, and then we turn it back over to you guys. Yeah, I'd like to do this, and the title is Shotgun Scrub, and of course we all know that a scrub is a guy who can't get no love, hanging out on the passenger side of his best friend's ride, trying to holler. That was me. Though I had absolutely no game. And here is the poem, Shotgun Scrub. Cock diesel Mustang, its gravelly oration and afterburn, its threat display pawing up asphalt, greeting night rain with kerosene. Why isn't this orange sickle sunrise melting over our private interstate preferable to a stroke of arcade cabinets choking on tokens? Fuck it. Pour 2 more fingers of leaded petrol and keep an eye on that dead clock. You know I got silences back home to feed. No chick should peep alone, yet anyone with me is alone. Am I right? But you ain't trying to hear that, G. Despite our dapping hands, slamming shots, shuffling points, despite daybreak coming on like a headache. Twin gold Marlboros, one lit, one hushed, sun and moon, Streetlights jump from puddle to hood polish. Contrails and castles of conjured smoke growl, snort, black and mild. Intersection red-assed, tagged wild style. Melody of E&J bottles in avalanche of applause. A sigh stalls in my throat, admiring the wound the sky has made, while kites dip stupidly along the marina. I rarely in readings get to do this because this is the last poem in the book. So this is called I Was a Hero Once. A dormant satellite in a room with children bouncing atoms off the walls. They are faceless, sweaty, and every storm-based verb. I corral them before the television, an antique microwave cooking colorless cartoons. As the constellation of them settle, I move to the next room and see it. The ceramic planter, which held a tittering ficus, had been kicked into slices. This sight weakens me into obscene prayers while pulling shards from the black pudding soil as if harvesting tombstones. I caress the threads of roots squiggling in my fingers like the hand of a dying grandparent. My heart pours itself empty through disbelieving eyes. And to think I was a hero once. I followed a pack of thieves who hid in a darkness unnamed by science, yet I could still see them and felt sorry for them as I levitated above the yard. The stitching in my palms itched, emitting ophidian beams of flame, igniting every wet, incombustible thing, synthesizing everything else to greasy ash. I could not be defeated. I was so alone. And look at me now, stacking broken pottery, pawing through soil as hissing tears drop like dead moths. Only a blank can be bested and crushed from within by indifferent children. All right, final poem. Yeah, I'd rather do something sweet as my final poem. Let's do this one. This is called Interview with a Rose. Curved as a lip pouting for a kiss. Sponge of sunlight, my tiniest filaments stand in ceremony to your song of color. Insects decide to walk the labyrinth of your perfumed path. Are you tickled by these cellular inspectors sipping your sweet wine of particulates? Would you have preferred to be a robin, burdened with the sky's most unique song? Do you wish you were the moon, a whole planet of petals with an atmosphere of cologne, a dolphin bathing in the coral medicines of an oceanic garden? You itch when you are closed, shy and anxious, unconcerned with weather, death, or dementia. You are the earth's soldier of love and desire. Yet, what do you know of it? Okay. What do you think?
What do I think?
Yeah, I think that's about my time.
Yeah. That's about. I mean, just because we're gonna close things up. But I mean, what do I think? I don't have words for what I think, my friend.
Okay.
There's just so much. There's just so much that you give to us in your work, and I appreciate that, and I appreciate the practice and the love you have for the craft. It is quite evident in not only what you write, but how you talk about it. So, I absolutely want to give you your flowers outside of all the accolades you already have, just to to let you know how essential you are to this art form and to this community. Absolutely, man. So, you know, we're gonna wrap up. I gotta have you back on at some point, so we'll figure that out. But again, James, thank you so much for your time. As we put in the chat, folks can find where to find you, also where to get your books and your material. If you don't know, reach out to us. We'll let you know. We'll have you be primary stalkers of James. So we'll make that happen. But again, brother, thank you. First of all, it's so good. I'm tongue-tied and I'm a poet. It's ridiculous. I am so honored and thankful that you shared yourself with us. And that's the point of the show. And let's keep it going.
Tshaka, thank you. Much love to you, brother. It's an honor to be able to read with you, and it's an honor for us to sit and have this conversation, because I always adore being able to talk about work with another professional. So holler at me anytime. I'm here for you always, and I thank you for inviting me to do this today.
Absolutely. All right, you take care. For all those that are on, thank you for joining us, and for those that will see this later on, you were going to be blown away, as I was. So you guys have a good time, a good day, and thanks for joining us.
All right, thank you, and much love.